Hi and welcome back to the Citizen channel. Hope you're all staying safe and well as we continue our look at the Benjamin Mendy Louis Sahat Matturie trial. We've got up to day 40 and we're going to get the closing statements from the prosecution and defence today. So this is the 17th of November 2022. Please, if you are new to the channel, it's usually football, but obviously this is involved this time as well. It's all things Manchester City, of course, past, present and forever, the good, the bad, and the not so good, and they're pretty ugly. So, yeah, join me. Press that subscribe button, push the bell notifications. Great to have you on board. Spread the word if you can, guys, and if you can give us a little thumbs up as well. It's just nice to get. It's nice to get views, of course it is, but always appreciated a little thumbs up or a like. Right, to summarise, yes, Mr. Mendy, 28, is accused of 7 counts of rape against 4 women, 1 count of attempted rape, and 1 count of sexual assault. The offences are alleged to have taken place at his Cheshire mansion between October 2018 and August 2021, relating to 7 women in total. His co-defendant, Mr. Matturie from Eccles, Salford, is accused of 6 counts of rape and 3 counts of sexual assault relating to 7 women. Judge Stephen Everett resides at Chester Crown Court, and my thanks as ever to the Manchester Evening News timeline and their court reporters today. We have a couple, Rebecca Day and John Shearhout. We all got back on with the case at 10:15 a.m. this morning. The jurors were brought back into court, and Timothy Craig Casey for the prosecution has started his closing submissions to the jury. Mr. Craig said he hoped to make his closing speech short and powerful and argumentative at times. I'm not going to apologise for that. That's the stage we are at, said the prosecutor, adding that he was sure the defence speeches would be equally powerful. He said at the end of the trial, the jurors would decide whether the defendants were guilty or not guilty and able to walk out of the door of the court into the waiting photographers. He asked the jurors to imagine themselves receiving a late 3 a.m. call after a Saturday night from a loved one, perhaps their daughter or a sister aged 19. Mr. Cray asked the jurors to imagine the loved one excitedly telling them they were in central Manchester and they had met a great guy and he's got a famous friend, and that they had been invited to a party at his friend's massive house in Cheshire. The prosecutor suggested the loved one says, "Don't wait up, as she will be able to get an Uber or a lift back in the morning." He asked them to think about a picture of their loved one a bit, drunk and in a picture with her arm around Mr. Matturie before getting into a taxi to head to the party. Mr. Cray said, "This is somebody we love. We go back to sleep. Does your mind go back to the young woman in this case and the images of them start coming to mind, sitting there telling you what happened to them?" Mr. Cray said the complainants had faced relentless challenges to their truth in court, adding that they were all daughters, sisters, or flatmates. He said it cannot have been easy for them to tell the court about times when they were not at your best. The case, he asked the jurors if they would drift off to sleep thinking lucky girls, famous footballers following that 3 a.m. call, or do you know that your loved one is at risk of something awful happening to her? Mr. Cray said the truth is, as you get out of that car right now, because you know, don't you, that for all the good qualities of Ben Mendy's character, there is a dangerous streak in him that makes him a predator. He said his co-defendant, Mr. Matturie, shares that same dangerous streak and had sex with women half his own age. Mr. Matturie was another predatory rapist, the jurors were told. Mr. Gray said virtually all parts of the evidence were not in dispute. For instance, there was no dispute about dates and times or who was present. He said the fact of sexual contact was not in dispute either. The prosecutor told the jury it all comes down to one factual question. Do I think the women I saw giving evidence in this court is telling me the truth between her and the defendant she accuses? More specifically, are you sure that the complainants told you in their different ways that they did not want to have sex with the defendant, when that they were telling the truth? Mr. Cray asked the jurors to consider 3 headings. The first, he said, was to consider what happened before the alleged offence and not what happened afterwards. He referred to questions the complainants had faced from the defence about why they did not leave immediately after the offence or why they had continued drinking. The barrister urged the jurors against stereotypical thinking about what happens after a sexual offence. The second heading, he said, was to consider the alleged offences themselves. We say what these complainants were walking into was toxic and dangerous, and that danger was created by these defendants, said Mr. Cray. While the parties happened over and over again, he said most of the complainants experienced them only once. It was a completely different experience for the woman than the defendants, the jurors were told. He mentioned the allegation of attempted rape made by woman 1, who says she was attacked by Mr. Mendy in October 2018. In her evidence, she has said she felt voiceless and powerless when she was on Ben Mendy's territory, said Mr. Craig. The woman had been intelligent and articulate. Mr. Gray said the defendants had knowledge and control, while the women were facing ever-changing situations. It gave the defendants the opportunity to abuse that knowledge and power. The defendants controlled these toxic situations. Mr. Cray said the third heading was that the defendants were living in an unreal world. He said Mr. Mendy had gone a long way to conceding that in his evidence about the effect the accusations had on him while he was in prison. He says it's only when he's in prison he started to change his ways, said Mr. Cray, gesturing towards the dock. Mr. Cray urged the jury to consider how the defendants did not appear to care about contraception. It was never a feature of their thinking, he said. Condoms were never used or discussed, and they were totally willing to have unprotected sex, he said. He said it indicated the defendants aren't telling the truth, he said. They were not interested in contraception. This case is not one size fits all, said Mr. Cray as he turned to individual incidents. He stressed there were many differences between the complainants' cases. He said the case of woman 7, both defendants were found not guilty of the allegations she made during the trial, had nothing to do with the other cases. Many of the other accusers had not even met her, he said. He said the acquittals concerning woman 7 can't be conclusive of other counts on the indictment. 4 of the complainants found themselves alone because of what the defendants had done, said Mr. Cray. They mentioned feeling isolated and not knowing what to do, he said. 2 of the accusers, woman 1 and woman 2, had described struggling with Mr. Mendy, the juries were told. Woman 4 had gone down to the cinema room looking for someone else, and Mr. Mendy followed her, he said. She had not spoken to him before that, the jurors are told. Mr. Cray said it was not much of a chat-up line, but he reminded the jury Mr. Mendy had told her he had slept with 10,000 women. The prosecutor said it was up to the jurors to decide if there were any similarities, but he said there can't really be an excuse that these patterns exist. He lists the complainants who had told their alleged attacker to stop or get off. Woman 5 and 11 had both described attacks which took place in a car, he said. 3 of the accusers described how they were asleep when the alleged sexual offences started, the jurors were told. Woman 6 had said she had sex with Mr. Mendy months before, but she said she was asleep when she says she was attacked by him. Woman 11 has said she did not consent to have sex with Mr. Matturie, citing the fact he was much older, but went on to have sex with a man referred to as Ghost, Mr. Mendy and Jack Grealish. Mr. Cray stressed this was not a court of morals and they had to judge what Woman 11 said about the alleged offence earlier in the night. After a break for lunch, John Shearhout took over reporting duties. Mr. Cray went on to say the defendants had an arrogant assumption that if you are at a party, you are good for sex. The prosecutor referred to Mr. Mendy's evidence. The defendant had conceded despite the sex, money and parties, it took prison for him to realise he was in trouble, he said. Mr. Mendy had even kept on going despite the start of a police investigation, the jurors are told. Mr. Mendy was able to hide his dark side because of his celebrity. Mr. Craig cited Jimmy Savile, who he said had fooled the nation. It was then the turn of Eleanor Laws KC for Mr. Mendy, who started her closing address to the jurors. She said, the reality is this one word against the another. There's been no witnesses or films of any of these complaints that are left to show you what has happened. The barrister said the complainants were adult women making real-life adult choices. She pointed to the drop case of woman 7, whose allegations of rape against both defendants were dropped by the prosecution after a video emerged showing her having sex with Mr. Matturie. She said her client's accusers had not been challenged by friends, family or even the police, and that this only happened for the first time in court. The sky-high way the prosecution had opened the case with references to panic rooms, phones being removed from women, had now completely changed, she said. Ms. Law said the women who had been characterised as victims in waiting, but she stressed they were only complainants until the jurors decide they are victims. She said the defendants had been presented as monsters who forced women against their will into panic rooms. It is very different now, she said. The reality is people do make untrue allegations, as Woman 7 did, and they make them in a really compelling way, said Miss Laws. She said it wasn't for the defence to show why, but in some cases in the trial it was obvious. Miss Laws told the jury there had been discussions amongst the complaints and there was a power in finding out something and then reframing their own story. Some have suggested they were suing Manchester City. Miss Laws said it was not known if that was the case, but it could not be ruled out. She said the lie told by Woman 7 was unfathomable. Miss Laws warned the jurors against a myth and stereotype that a woman would not come and give evidence in a witness box to lie. She said the jurors had seen her lie in vivid technicolor. Mr. Mendy's home was not a hammer house of horrors where they were locked in and could not get out, Miss Laws told the jury. She said it was an open house most of the time unless there was a party going on. None of the accused had given evidence that they tried to get out of the room or tried to escape the house, she said. Phones were removed from women, but this was half-hearted, and many managed to keep their devices, the jurors were told. Ms. Law said there was a reason for the practice because her client was doing something wrong, such as hosting an event during lockdown, or Jack Grealish was there. The seized phones were kept in a heap rather than in a box, said the barrister. Miss Law said every single woman wanted to go there. She said the case was not like a sex trafficking trial where children and teens were plied with drink and drugs and had no choice. The barrister said this case was quite the reverse. She said this case had revealed, and this is completely uncontroversial, that the women in this case have made choices for themselves, who decide they want to go to a nightclub, they want to drink, they want to meet someone like Mr. Mendy. She said they wanted to meet strangers in a pub and dance and maybe flirt. Miss Law said this attitude could only apply to someone like a teacher. They all enjoyed going to the pub, meeting strangers, the VIP treatment, dancing and flirting with men and having fun. All of them are taking risks. They are going to the house of someone they do not know at all. They often arrive not even having met Mr. Mendy. They wanted to be there, and while they are there, there are these strange connections with other men and women. It's intense and superficial. These women decided for themselves, said Miss Laws. She also stressed it was not a court of morals, but she said some of the women had slept with more than one man and that afterwards they regretted their actions. Miss Laws told the jurors she would have been surprised at the outset of the trial if they had not had some derogatory comments about the defendants and asked how could they. She said the reality is that there are distasteful aspects of what Mr. Mendy has said about his lifestyle. There's no question about it. I'm going to ask you to put that in context, what it is he said. He just did not stop. He didn't stop drinking. He didn't stop clubbing. He didn't stop having casual sex. He didn't even stop in lockdown, which is completely appalling. I'm sure there's not a single person here who's not had someone close to them severely affected by COVID. He didn't stop. He didn't stop having parties with women. He didn't even stop after he was arrested. Ms. Law said her client couldn't stop when his own father died of COVID. She said his attitude remained until his arrest in August 2021. Since then, he had come to a realisation about his lifestyle. Ms. Law said that maybe there isn't anything wrong with having sex with a lot of people, but that wasn't what they were being asked to decide. The barrister said the character evidence the jurors had heard had down her client was happy-go-lucky, but that he had indulged in hedonistic behaviour. She urged the jurors to take a step back to decide who he really is. Miss Law said it's not in his character to be predatory and monster, that effectively he must be according to the prosecution, because what he's done time and time again and deliberately bringing these women in and then doing what he likes with them, regardless of the effects, on their account, that they are saying no, struggling or trying to fight him off every time. The barrister added that's quite something to be that kind of person. Her client's family, she said, had testified he was adorable, full of hugs, kisses, very, very kind, humble and simple. She said without the sexual encounters, his house parties were childlike and naive. At 4:29 p.m, that brings the trial to an end for today, and it will resume tomorrow, Friday, the 18th of November. So please join me for that. Let me know your comments. It'd be great to hear from you. Until we meet again, I only ask one thing, don't I? Please stay safe, everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.